As you can see, Rabbi Nasi is at the top. His students, we started with that yesterday. Now, there's a great story about Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia, do you see where he is? He's known as the Transitional Period. Works? Even one tap, huh?
Sometimes it works.
Sometimes, okay. I think you have to wait till the feed starts and then push it. Maybe that might be the key.
Yeah, maybe that's
Okay. So, Rabbi Chia, the story is told of him. He was known as Rabbi Chia Hagadol. And why is he called Rabbi Chia Hagadol? One more minute. I'll just get you there. You're here. That's what's important. Rabbi Chia Hagadol. You see his name there? Chia? So, he had a...
You said all the rabbis, in this time period, they're called Rabbi, not Rav. Rav is only one better.
That's correct. Right. Rabbi is either Tanaim or the Amoraim in Eretz Yisrael. I want to pull it up for you and show you this story. Chia the Great. His name was Chia Bar Abba, and let me... Here it goes like this. Hanina Bar Chama, you can see, he's not on the list even. Hanina Bar Chama, oh, there he is, number one. Okay. So Hanina Bar Chama was boasting that he could, if the Torah were to ever be lost from Israel, what would they do? So you can see that, the time period, remember we were talking about the Roman persecution. Rabbi Nasi felt he had to be such a reformed Jew, to be a reformer and actually create a book, the Mishnah. And now the world is different. And so his students were wondering, what will we do if all of Torah gets forgotten from Israel? Hanina Bar Chama was boasting that if everybody else was lost, he himself could reconstruct the Torah using his logic, using his power of reasoning. It's a fascinating sort of... Can't imagine they're sitting there having a beer together, and they're at the bar, and say, well, if everything the nuclear war would happen, I'd be able to save the world and be the hero, and I'd reconstruct. What would you use? He said, I'd use my logic, and it's a very bold claim. Chia, in response, said, I have a different method, and apparently he was very involved in teaching. And he said the following. I can send you the quote in the book, in the WhatsApp list, if that'll. And he says, I'm going to copy it and paste it for you into the WhatsApp group. He says as follows: what I would do is that I would bring flax, take some seeds and plant them. And then, when it would grow, I'd spin the flax into threads. And from the threads, I'd make ropes. And from the ropes, I'd make traps, nets, in which I would trap deer. And on the deer that I would catch, I would skin them. And, of course, the meat I would give to the poor people. And I'd use the hides to make parchment. And on the parchment, I would write the Torah, and I'd write the Torah in different, there's another version here, this is a shortened version. On the Torah scrolls that I would write, I would go to I think he said I'd write 12 Torah scrolls. And I would go to each small town. I'd go around the villages where there's orphans, I guess, because of this horrible persecution or whatever it is. And I teach the children. In one place I teach them the book of Bereshit. In the other place I teach them the book of Shmot. In the other place I teach them the book of Vayikra. And they would all be learning just that one book. And then I'd teach the children, and eventually they'd all teach each other the books they learned. This was his retort to Chanina Bar Chama's suggestion. What do you think he was trying to say, and what do you see? And when Rav, I think, heard this, or Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi heard that, he said, that's why they called him Chia Hagadol, Chia the Great. This is why he was so great. Yeah.
So I'm thinking about this practically.
Yes.
So the most prolific, prominent fairs of our day today can produce approximately 3 Torahs a year.
That's a lot. Yeah.
This is.
Depends if they're working full time. Yeah.
If they're working full time.
Wow.
So just the writing would take him 4 years to produce all.
Okay.
At least 4 years.
Yeah.
Plus all the tracking that would have to do to get all the parchment.
That's right.
We're talking about.
And wait, he's got a plant.
Yeah, it's
to get the twine, to get the flax, to turn it into rope, to turn it into twine. Wow, multi-process. Exactly. Exactly.
A good 30 years maybe.
What
teaching the students.
What is the most impressive thing of the story I just told you of this his plan?
Is that he has the Torah memorized to heart, all the details, all the letters.
Okay. Well, you could say that Chanina Bar Chama was proud that he could reconstruct it from his mind, and Chanina and Rabbi Chia is saying, no, we're going to teach it to them from the text. We have a basic text, but we could maybe derive it from there. But what else? What else is impressive in this story? Chanina's plan. I don't think he ever did that, but I mean, he was involved, I think, in teaching Torah to the children. So what I'd like to say is that, what's impressive is that he doesn't leave out that he's going to give the flesh of the deer to the poor people to eat. Sure, he's teaching the children, and of course he's got an education, and it's a long process. He realizes that education is a long process. But he also doesn't forget the needy people. But and most importantly is that he focuses on the children. Focuses on the children, and the children that they're going to teach each other. And by the way, not to call anybody a child, but B'ezrat Hashem, we're going to have another gathering of the English department next week before Shavuot. We have all the different groups coming together, the different shiurim, like we had last week. Last week we just did introductions, but we're actually going to study together. We're going to have chavrutot, and we're going to have a learning session in honor.
It's going to be repeating.
Well, we're going to do one more. We'll see. I don't know if we're going to do it every month, but before Shavuot, it's a good idea. And it was so good. I think it was powerful to see the whole group together. I don't know if you guys enjoyed it. But next time we're going to actually study. We're going to learn Torah together. And, that was the original plan. Well, it just took too long, all the introductions. But that was valuable in itself. B'ezrat Hashem, we're going to have another one. Anyways, the idea that Rabbi Chia is saying is that we're going to have the children teach each other and basically work from the ground up.
So what also good is with this plan is that because of the fact that every village has only one Torah scroll, one book of the Chumash, missing one thing or more things. Therefore, they're gonna search for who was we're missing some parts here. Well, who knows where they are now?
Right.
Any questions? So this will lead them to search for the other Chafkin scrolls or
Right, and they have to be. They need each other. So they have to be. It's a group effort. Right nowadays, we make a big deal that the most successful companies in the world are the ones who know how to collaborate, how to work together, and sharing. And this is Rabbi Chia's, insight into education, is that it's not just, I'm the big teacher. Chanina Bar Chama was saying, I can reconstruct the whole Torah from my logic, from my reasoning, and then, whatever, I'll save the Torah. That'll be the preservation of Torah comes from the little children learning Torah, from the ground up, from them the slow process of education. Anyways, this was he was a major figure. You can imagine stepping into Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi's shoes is not an easy thing. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, what a great great leader. Boker Tov, Amos. But he was, so we're talking about the first period. So the great Amora in the land of Israel, the one which you should really, together with Rabbi Chia, were, Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Oshia. Rabbi Chanina, we just mentioned Rabbi Chanina bar Chama. Rabbi Oshia, it's hard to define transitional period or the first generation of Amoraim, but Rabbi Oshia is known for compiling the Tosefta. Right, the Tosefta, we said, is all the material that Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi didn't put into the Mishnah. All the Braitas was collected by Rabbi Oshia, as you can see it here in the period after Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, and Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi.
He compiled it into one book.
One book, right? It's called the Tosefta. Yeah. It's a collection of Braitot, exactly. Yafeh. Now, what happened with Rav was interesting because his real name. I'm looking at generation number 1. Did you have this page from yesterday, Amos? Looks like this.
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay, and as we go, you can actually fill in. This is a new sheet that's empty. You can fill in so already you can fill in, I guess, in Eretz Yisrael, the first generation. I would put Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, who I didn't tell you too much about, but he was really known as the greatest Amora of the first generation. Oh yeah, okay. You weren't here yesterday. Sure, I have one here. I'm sure I have another one. I hope I have another one. We'll find it. Now, Rav was a student of Rabbi Yehuda Levi as well, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi as well. And Rav decided to go to Bavel to teach them. They didn't have a lot of knowledge. They didn't have a lot of scholarship. Right? All the scholarship was focused in the land of Israel at the Tanaim. But there were a lot of Jews still left in Bavel throughout the centuries. And right, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi.
Oh, yes.
Good morning. B'vakasha. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I can give you this as well. This is another version, a bigger version of what you have primarily focused on the rabbis' names. Here we actually have the dates as well. In any case, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, and Rav said, I need to go down to Bavel. I need to go down to Bavel and teach the Jews in Babylon. His real name was Rabbi Abba bar Ibo, actually. He had a few nicknames. The most famous name is Rav. And he became known, when he went down to Bavel, he wanted to get permission from his Rebbe, smicha, we call it now, ordination as the rabbi, to be allowed to be a teacher. There's some kind of a process called ordination. So he went to Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi and he said, I'm going to Bavel, I'm going to teach Torah to the masses in Babylon. They need teachers. You could say he's going on shlichut. Nowadays there's this concept that Jews from the land of Israel go and they go teach. Like my children went to Australia for 2 years. They came back, Baruch Hashem. But they taught in the schools there, and he was a rabbi of a community there. So Rav went to Rabbi Yehuda Levi and he said, give me smicha, please. And he said the following, till today we use these words. Yoreh Is he allowed to instruct? Like the word Torah comes from hora'ah, which means instruction. Yoreh is, can he instruct? And Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi answered, Yoreh. Till this day, when you get smicha, it's turned into, it's called, I have a piece of paper at home that says, Yoreh, Yoreh. It's really a question and an answer. But it's become a phrase that you get permission to be a rabbi. It's called Yoreh, Yoreh. But then he asked another question. Yadin, can he be a judge, to judge? And he said, Yadin. Yes, he has the authority to judge as well. In Israel, there's actually 2 stages of smicha. I don't have that. I have Yoreh, Yoreh, but I don't have Yadin, Yadin. Okay, you study more tests, there's a process. Only people who actually, if I wish I had the time to complete this course of study for that as well. I mean, it's all good Torah that I'd love to learn, but I don't see myself as being a judge necessarily in a rabbinic court. Although I have sat on rabbinic courts, but for other issues. In any case, then he asked the third question, Yatir bechorot? Does he have the authority to look at the firstborn animal? Has anybody heard of this idea of the firstborn animal?
Yeah.
Belongs
Belongs to the Kohen. Belongs to the Kohen. But what happens? Do we usually give it to the Kohen?
No.
What happens? Why not? Well, there's no Beit HaMikdash, so why give it to the Kohen, right? But the Bechor, it can't be redeemed. It can't be redeemed. What do we do with the Bechor? It's in your field, the firstborn. It's in your flock. What are you going to do with it? So the answer is that you wait until it gets a blemish. Once it's blemished, it doesn't have to be given to the Kohen anymore because it would be invalid for the sacrifice in any case. So who decides which is a blemish that's significant enough to make it invalid, and therefore you get to eat your firstborn animal, firstborn cow, or your firstborn goat, or whatever it is. The rabbi decides. The rabbi has to know exactly there's a list of definitions of blemishes which are considered to be significant enough. Mum, it's called. Yatir bechorot, and here Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says to him, Lo yatir bechorot. He wasn't giving him the full ordination, the full authority. Why? So it's unclear, but the simple explanation is that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was wary of the Jewish community in Bavel becoming too independent, too self-sufficient. What about the centrality of the land of Israel? He wanted the land of Israel to remain. This is Rav. This is the story about Rav going from the land of Israel to start. He did. He went down without the full smicha. He got 2/3 of the smicha, but there was a little bit of a star there next to his ordination. And he founded the yeshiva in a place called Sura. Sura was a town in Babylon. And the yeshiva there lasted for hundreds and hundreds of years. Rav was the founder until almost to the time of the Gaonim. That's right.
When the Mongols came to the story?
So as you can see on this this chart, they give one to Hirsch. The world events are on the right-hand column. You can see this is called the Sassanid Kingdom, was in charge at that time. And throughout the period of this 300 years of the Amoraim, this period is only 300 years, we can see that Byzantium takes over from the Roman Empire. It becomes more Christian, and ultimately there's the East and the Western Roman Empire. Finally, the fall of the Roman Empire. I believe the Arabs took over, if I'm not mistaken. No, who took over after? So who came over?
After the Byzantines?
Yeah.
The Arabs, sorry.
It is the Arab period, yeah. It's hundreds of years still, but Byzantium didn't last for very long. It was maybe 200 years. So, but in any case, Rav was otherwise known as Abba Aricha. He founded he was born in Bavel, went to study with Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. He was actually a nephew of Rabbi Chia. and he studied with him, in Rebbe's house. And as I said, Rebbe Yehuda Nasi didn't want these musmachim, the people ordained, to leave the land of Israel, but he felt he had to go, and he ultimately, Rebbe's son, Rabban Gamliel, he finally, he also didn't give Rav his smicha, but he went back to Bavel and had 1,200 full-time students. Bavel did become actually the center of learning, despite Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's, as we can see, it's a good thing it did, because we have the Talmud Bavli that came out of all this learning for more than 300 years that remained. The land of Israel, only by year 500 it was over. Whereas in Bavel they continued to study these Amoraim, continued to develop the Talmud. As we said yesterday, Rav Tana Upalig. Rav is the one exception of all the Amoraim who was allowed to go head to head and contradict a Tana. Rav is called like a Tana. Rav Tana Upalig. He can debate against one of the Tanaim, and some of the Braitot bring him. And usually we paskin like Rav in Isur veheter whenever there's different realms of halacha. And before I talk to you about his partner in his partner in leading the Jewish community in Bavel, Shmuel, I'll take Hirsch's question. Hirsch, you had a question?
So it would be correct to say that Bavel became the center of the Jewish world in the period of the Amoraim.
Correct. As the academies in Israel eventually were closed.
Why because of the Byzantine oppression?
Yes, exactly. The Babylonian centers became more and more important. But so Shmuel, he lived in a town near Surah called Nehar Da'ah, which was a major Jewish cultural center, and he established the yeshiva there. He is considered to be the most authoritative judge in the realms of Dinei Mamonot, which means monetary issues. Another page? Yeah. Monetary issues. There's also this page for the two guys who just came in. I'm happy they came, but a little late. So halacha is always like Rav when it comes to matters of ritual law. Isser v'heter. Halacha Rav. What, the empty one? Sure. And when it comes to dinim, meaning monetary laws, the halachas like Shmuel. So Rav and Shmuel are the major leaders in the first generation in Bavel. Okay? Is that clear? We have Rabbi Shua ben Levi in Eretz Yisrael and Rav and Shmuel in the land of Israel. Second generation are their students. We're not going to tell you all the stories about them, but yeah, question.
They are both dinim?
Rav, the halach is like Rav in Isurim. It's called Isurim, is ritual law, like Asur, Mutar, on Shabbat, all the things that are Asur and Mutar. From yesterday, I'll see if I have one. And Shmuel was known as the authority when it comes to monetary law. Okay, this is ritual law versus monetary law. Halacha kerav Isurei. Halacha keshmuel b'dinei. Dinei means that dinei mamonot. It means monetary law. I'll look for it later. Remind me, Israel. I can't find it right now. But okay. Okay, they're students in. We're not going to go through all of them, but the second generation, the major figure in the land of Israel is Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. You might have heard of them. Stories about Reish Lakish are legendary. Reish Lakish was known for being a gladiator, some people say. Rabbi Reish Lakish was not religious. He was really a ruffian.
Yochanan is...
Rabbi Yochanan.
And Rish Lakish are the same person?
No, they're at the same generation. They're in the second generation Amorae Eretz Yisrael. The story goes that Rabbi Yochanan was so beautiful. He was that the women would want to look at him, so that their children would come out so beautiful like him. It's a strange story, but there's many stories about how Rabbi Yochanan was such a powerful personality. He was a Talmud of Rabbi Yehuda Anasi himself, as well as Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Oshia, and he was the head of the yeshiva in the Sanhedrin in Tiberia. To this day, you could see there's a shul named after Rabbi Yochanan in Tiberia, the greatest period of learning in the land of Israel. This was the central period of Amoraic learning in the land of Israel. He was the youngest of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's Talmidim. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi had 17 rows. He had rows and rows and rows of students. Rabbi Yochanan was in the back, behind Rav, 17 rows behind Rav. And he said, I didn't understand the thing of what Rav was arguing about with Rabbi Yehuda Nasi all the time, but ultimately he grew in his learning, and he became the leader of the academy in the land of Israel. The Talmud records that he had a very, very hard life. Founded the yeshiva in Tveria, but he actually started off a very rich man, but under the persecution and everything, he had to sell everything that he had to support his Torah learning, so that he could continue to study. Also, he had 10 children, and they all died in his lifetime. Talmud says that Rabbi Yochanan had a very, very hard life, and he would go around to comfort others who lost children and show to them, listen, this is my 10th son that I just outlived. And you could just imagine what conditions they were living through. I don't know whether it was the hygiene or the persecution, but he was, after Rav and Shmuel died in Bavel, in the first generation, Rabbi Yochanan was the leader of the entire Jewish people, not only in the land of Israel, but also in Bavel. Of course, we're going to talk about who took over the yeshivot in Bavel. But Rabbi Yochanan Bar Nafcha was his name. But Rabbi Yochanan, he actually drew scholars from Bavel to study under him. Many times, when they had a machloket in Bavel, what's the correct approach? They would send a letter to Rabbi Yochanan. Now, Rabbi Yochanan was once, he went to walk along the banks of the Jordan River. And in the Jordan River, he sees a fellow called Reish Lakish, the ruffian, the gladiator, swimming. And Reish Lakish himself was apparently very athletic and very strong. And Rabbi Yochanan said to him, your strength should be used for Torah. And what does Reish Lakish say? He says, well, if you let me marry your sister. Apparently Rabbi Yochanan was beautiful, so his sister was beautiful too. Apparently Rabbi Yochanan had a sister who was very beautiful. And they made a deal. And lo and behold, Rabbi Lakish, you could say, became a Baal Tshuva, and he entered the academy and he studied, and he really used all of his strength now intellectually, and he became the study partner of Rabbi Yochanan. And so much so that later on Reish Lakish passed away before Rabbi Yochanan. And when he passed away, Rabbi Yochanan was inconsolable. Not just because he lost his brother-in-law, but because he said, I have nobody else to study with. And all the students said, what do you mean? We have so many people to study with. He said, I'll tell you the difference. When I study with you, I give you a Dvar Torah, and all of you pipe up, and you all give me support. You give me this proof for what I said, and this proof for what I said, and another proof. Reish Lakish was the only one who, when I would say a Dvar Torah, he would give me a list of proofs of why I'm wrong. He'd be the one that would be my sparring partner. And because I had this counterpart, the learning became even better. And so Reish Lakish was, as I like to say, the sparring partner of Rabbi Yochanan. The two of them really were the leaders of the generation. Unfortunately, Reish Lakish passed before Rabbi Yochanan. There's a number of stories about exactly how he passed, and there was a pretty sad story about he was laughed at, and later in life. But this is Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. Yes.
So each of these names listed here are the leaders of their respective generations.
Yeah, these are the major Amoraim of that generation. That's right. Each one is, as you can see, about 30, 40 years. And Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish in Eretz Yisrael are known as the second generation. In parallel, in Bavel, we have Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda. You notice that the names I'm using are Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda because that's the moniker in Bavel. That's what the names, there were others, of course, but we can't get into all of them. We're going to move ahead to the third generation after Amos's question.
Just a basic question. Is Reish Lakish has some connection with the city of Lachish?
I don't think so. No. It's spelled differently.
And
So
you name them both together. That means they're Zugim, or
they're sort of like a pair, but we don't have anymore the Nasi and the Sanhedrin, the head of the Sanhedrin. I don't think it was existent anymore, those official positions. So we'll move ahead, and in the third generation, in Eretz Yisrael, we have perhaps the fellow who's mentioned more than any other in the Palestinian Talmud, Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi. Again, Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi, because they're in the land of Israel. So they're the students of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rabbi Ami became the head of the yeshiva in Tiberia after Rabbi Yochanan died. And they were the leadership in the land of Israel. In Bavel, there we said the third generation is the generation of Rabbi and Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef was blind. Rav Yosef became blind later in life after he gained all of his scholarship. Rabbi and Rav Yosef are known for having two unique characteristics in the style of their learning. Rabbi was known as Oker Harim, and Rav Yosef was Sinai. What does that mean? Sinai means Sinai. He was called Sinai, and Rabbi was known as the uprooter of mountains. What these represent, and the Talmud debates, which is better? Which attributes of scholarship are better? Uprooter of mountains? Somebody who knows to argue. Somebody who knows to reason. And to uproot a mountain is a metaphor for give a logical reasoning, which is so powerful that it wins the other one over in argumentation. And Sinai is a different style of our different talents, and that is memorization, to know all of the laws. So if there's ever a question, you always have it at your fingertips, and you just your breadth of knowledge. So it's sort of like there was the debate: which is greater, the breadth of knowledge or the sharpness of your intellect in terms of reasoning? And this is debated in the Talmud. Rabbi was known as Oker Harim, the uprooter of the mountains, and Rav Yosef. You can imagine it stood him in good stead when he went blind that he had memorized, he knew so many teachings because of his memorization. The end of the debate was Sinai Adif. Sinai was considered to be more important. Why? Because everybody needs the owner of wheat. The owner of wheat? Wheat, of course, is the staff of life. Wheat is the basic produce that you have to live off. Whereas if you don't know anything, If you don't know the fundamentals of Judaism, what will help you that you're in the Talmud class and you can, analyze things and rationally try to argue, do the argumentation. But if you don't know the difference between a Tana and an Amora, you're not going to get too far. If you don't know the Shisha Sidra Mishnah, what they are, then you're going to be pretty much a very sharp ignoramus. And so Rav Yosef was given the nod. Is that a translation of what I said? It is? Okay.
You have a beautiful voice.
Thank you. I didn't know Chinese. Everybody needs the wheat, the owner of the wheat. And so Sinai gets a little bit of a nod. But obviously we need both. We need to have the sharp intellect for analysis. This was, the truth is, there was a third school in Bavel. Not only Surah and the Hardea, which we mentioned earlier, the school of Rav and the school of Shmuel, there was a third town called Pumbedita, where Rabbi was the Rosh Yeshiva at first, and then Rav Yosef took over. They were the heads in this third town called Pumbedita. They had 400 students in the yeshiva in Pumbedita. He went blind in his old age, and they had many, many debates between them. He died in year 328. So many people came to his funeral that the bridges over the Prat River, right, they broke. The bridges broke because there were just so many people at his funeral. Rabbi and Rav Yosef. And as we're quickly just going through to give you the bare bones of an understanding of the 5 generations, we're up to the 4th generation. The teachers in the land of Israel are less and less significant. The 4th and the 5th generation, there's Hillel Nasiah, Hillel II, as you can see. He was known as Hillel Nasiah, and he's the famous one who created the calendar, the perpetual calendar that we use up until today. Everybody knows. Many people have said to me before, oh yeah, wasn't that made by Hillel? Well, don't confuse him with the Hillel who was in the Second Temple era, the Hillel of Hillel and Shammai, the last of the pairs. No, it's Hillel Nasiah, as you could see towards the end of the Amoraic period. Hillel, Yonah was a different rabbi. Rabbi Hillel and Rabbi Yonah. And Rabbi Yossi Bar Zvida, they were the leadership in the land of Israel in the 4th generation. And Rabbi Mana and Rabbi Tanchuma Bar Abba. Now you might have heard the name Tanchuma in the 5th generation in Eretz Yisrael, because yesterday, or a few days ago, I brought in a book here. What book did I bring that had the name Tanchuma in it? No.
I want to say Tanakh, and I thought
No.
it was wrong.
No. There was a book that had the word Tanchuma in the title. Nope. We said that there's a few different types of midrashim. Right? There's midrash halacha and midrash agadah. And of the midrash agadah, one of them was called midrash Rabbah. The most famous one is the central one, is the great midrash Rabbah. But there's another collection of midrash that's called midrash Tanchuma. Midrash Tanchuma was compiled by Rabbi Tanchuma Bar Abba in the 5th generation of Amoraim. In Bavel, we're now in the 4th generation. The 4th generation, here we have Abaye and Rava. Abaye and Rava are known as the central pillars of the entire Talmud. There's a calculation that someone once made that there's almost no page of Talmud in the entire Talmud Bavli that doesn't quote Abaye or Rava. Abaye is a nickname. He was an orphan. He was brought up by his uncle, Rabbi. Right? Rabbi, we just mentioned, who was the Rosh Yeshiva in Pumbedita. He brought up his nephew. His real name was Nachmani ben Kailil. He was called Abaye. because he was, which means like a little father. He was named after Rabba's father, who was his grandfather, and whose name was Nachmani. Anyways, his real name was Nachmani. He learned from childhood with Rabba, and he continued the chain and became a central teacher and Amora. He was a farmer, lived off farming, but he learned in the evenings and when there was time off from agriculture, when there was periods during the year. He learned, of course, from Rabba and from Rav Yosef. And when Rav Yosef died, he was chosen to be the next Rosh Yeshiva, even though there were other candidates. As you can see, his partner in crime, if we spoke about the sparring partners, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, Abai had Rava. Now don't confuse Rava with Rabba. You see that? Generation 3 is Rabba and Rav Yosef. In generation 4, we have Abai and Rava. Rava is with a vet. Actually, Rava is with an aleph at the end. It's a more Amoraic name, like Rav, right? Rava. And Rabbah actually is with a hey. So it's not actually spelled exactly the same, but they're definitely pronounced differently. That's the way we can distinguish between them. If you see it in the book, it's going to be with a hey. It's Rabbah. And 4th generation is Rava. His style of learning was more by analysis than by tradition. And in all of the machlokot, between Rava and Abaye, the halacha is like Rava. Except for 6. There's 6 famous exceptions. There's an acronym, but we don't need to get into that right now. Rava and Abaye argue, like I said, on almost every page of Talmud. In his time, the center from Pumbedita, after Abaye dies, it moves to Machoza, a 4th city in Bavel. All of the great scholars in Bavel moved to Machoza, and the yeshiva of Rava there in Machoza was the only one in Bavel at his time. And after he died, they split up again. But Rava was such a tzaddik that he fasted 2 days of Yom Kippur because he wasn't sure which day it was. So this is a unique feature. He was both great in halacha and agadah, and he died in year 352. Abaye and Rava, okay?
He fasted 48 hours without stopping.
Yeah. Okay, there's more, but those are the major ones, as you can see. The 5th generation, Rav Papa. You might have heard of Rav Papa's children, because at every Siyum Masechet, when we celebrate, there's a standard text that we recite when we finish learning a Masechet of Talmud, and we quote the 8 children of Papa. Rami bar Papa, Achai bar Papa, Sura bar Papa, all of his names. Apparently, all of his children were very, very learned and very holy. And so whenever we finish a Masechet, we mention all of Rav Papa's children.
What is Papa?
It's just a name. It's just a name. That was his name. Yeah?
In Russian, I think it's father. And in Portuguese, it's Pope.
No, he was not the Pope.
The father. Yeah, that's why.
So, and in the last generations, as you can see here, there's the 2 fellows who I already mentioned to you earlier, Rav Ashi and Ravina. Rav Ashi and Ravina, who are known as the Sof Hora'ah, the end of instruction, meaning that they are the last figures of the Amoraim. They are the ones who are known as the editor of the Talmud Bavli. Now there's a debate, as you can see in generation 8. There's another Ravina 2, Ravina 1 and Ravina 2. And so there's perhaps there was a process of editing that started with Rav Ashi and Ravina number 1, and probably since there are, the children of, like Mar bar Rav Ashi, as you can see in the 7th generation, is mentioned in the Talmud. So obviously, his father couldn't have closed the book if his son, who lived after him, is quoted. Could be that he was quoted earlier. We're not quite sure exactly how the book was sealed, but a number of factors aided editing the Bavli. Rav Ashi didn't do it all by himself. There was a committee of Chachamim. There were better political conditions, better economic conditions, and Rav Ashi himself was very rich, and so he was able to bring together, integrate all of the discussions of those 6 generations of Amoraim and create the book as we know it, 37 Masechtot of Talmud Bavli out of the 63. He didn't complete all 63, but 37 of the 63 we have Talmud Bavli, thanks to Rav Ashi and Ravina's work as well. Okay, this was just a little brief survey. Questions, comments? Yes?
The 6th generation, no school of Shammai and the school of Hillel, they mixed.
So the school of Shammai and Hillel continued, Hillel and Shammai, who lived in the land of Israel, in the period of the Tanaim. Now we've been discussing the chart that you're holding, that's the period of the Tanaim. And there are the schools of Hillel and Shammai. But after Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, those schools pretty much ceased to exist. And we have a new era, the Amoraim. The Amoraim no longer felt that they were on the same level as the Tanaim. So now, once Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi collected and finalized the book called the Mishnah, and all the teachings were collected in the Tosefta and in the Midrashim, the Amoraim continued to discuss it, but they didn't have the same, they couldn't argue head-to-head against Beit Hillel or Beit Shammai. It became a question of, do you follow Beit Hillel, do you follow Beit Shammai? But you can't really contradict. An Amora does not contradict a Tana. Who's the one exception?
Rav.
Excellent. Good. Okay. So have you filled out this page now? Ready this empty page I gave you? So take a few minutes now. Take a few minutes now and look at both the chart of the Tanaim I gave you and the chart of the Amoraim and fill in your own chart of Tanaim and Amoraim. You don't have one? Well, then I'll give you one. Pass this down, please, to Renan. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that, to fill in the charts. And I'll look for an extra Tanaim chart for Israel. Should have one here somewhere.
Well, you need to rewrite.
Yes, yeah, fill it in your own handwriting. That's right. You could do it in English, do it in Hebrew, whichever one you want. But it's for you. Portuguese, sure. Portuguese is a... Let's see.
Shaya Bar Iya, it's before the first,
That's correct.
so don't interfere.
Right. They're in the transitional period between the Tanaim and the Amorai.
Oh, okay.
You're welcome.
Who compiled the final Jerusalem Talmud? Is it Rabbi Mana?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. Let's see if I can find the answer here. But
Because it's in this paper.
he's the last generation, right?
It says the year 395,
Yes.
which is already when the Jerusalem rabbis.
Redaction of the Jerusalem Talmud. Yeah, I hear you. Let me see if I have
But
that.
it could be that it has been compiled again by Babylonian.
I doubt it. They're different schools. Different. Let's see. Here, there will.
So I have to ask you to
Yeah. The transition.
Moshe,
Sir.
they ask you to bring the scissors from the office.
So wait, Amorai, the first aleph has a second half beneath it?
This should have a patach. Maybe a chataf patach, but Amorai.
Because I'm looking on Safari and it has a second half beneath the first.
Amorai? No, it's a mistake.
So it's supposed to be a
Is older
I don't think so. I don't know. Yeah, actually, there is one. There's one, but I need one to photocopy for the next person. So after I photocopy, I'll get you one, but right now I don't have one. So I still don't know the answer to your question, David. But
Yeah.
Rabbi Mana is the most quoted name in all of the Talmud Yerushalmi.
Okay.
It's a very central figure, Rabbi Mana. But did he actually do the work of editing? I don't know. There wasn't much editing, because they were persecuted. And that's why Hillel made the calendar. He said it because what did they have before they had a set calendar?
They had for new moon, somebody came to.
Right, they had to have testimony. Exactly. And if they had to come before the Beitin. If there's no Beitin, well, there's not going to be any calendar. And so he realized that we better set up a system. And he sent it to Bavel, and also it made the community in Bavel less dependent on the community in the land of Israel, because they were having trouble. They were having persecution. So this was a sign of the times. And it was a smart thing that he did, because as we see, the scholarship, the academies in the land of Israel could not continue after that fifth generation. Thanks, Moshe. Thanks. Okay, so I'll let you, I think till three, divided into three is enough. Three is good. Let's take it up. What I want to show you now is, let's do a summary of the period of the sages. We're going to do it here on the board, and then we're going to put it on the wall, as we've done before. So the first thing, if you could finish up and pay attention. Give me your attention up here to the board. All right? We're talking about the period of Chazal, right? Right? We have it up here already. We now have the age frame. We know the years. Okay?
0 to 500.
0 to 500. Okay. So we know that Chazal is divided into two periods. The period of the Tanaim and the period of the Amoraim. And we also know that during this period, right, this was what years? 0 to 200, and this is till 500 and plus. In Babel, they continued a little bit longer, till the Talmud Bavli by Ravina and Ravashi. What does it say here? Ravina and Ravashi, around 500. It could be a little bit later. Final redaction, they have around 500 CE. We'll leave it at 500. Okay? Now, most importantly, we're going to go through the generation 1, generation 2, 3, 4, and 5. 5 generations of Tanaim in the land of Israel. Right? We're going to talk about their names in just a minute. And then we're going to have, in Amoraim, we're going to have generation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 6, 7, and 8. But we're going to split it in two. We're going to have in the land of Eretz Yisrael. EY stands for Eretz Yisrael. And over here we're going to have Bavel, right? Because we have two centers.
And the Tanai, it's
only in Eretz Yisrael. Correct. There was no academies of learning. The truth is, when Rav came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he found people that really didn't know how to keep Shabbat. They were really, really weak. The communities were very weak in Bavel. But he strengthened them. He said, what did he have? 1,200 students in his academy. And then there was the academy of Naharda and Pumbedita. And the land of Babylon really became even stronger than the land of Israel in their learning. After, of course, the heyday of Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, in the second generation in Eretz Israel. Things sort of dwindled in the land of Israel, and the center of gravity of Jewish learning moved to Babylon. But more importantly than all this stuff, I want to make sure that we are very clear here. What is special about the period of the Tanaim? What books were created? So famously, during this Tanaim period, we have the Mishnah, right? 6 orders of the Mishnah, which is the revolution. It's the collection of the oral Torah, which ultimately leads us to the Talmud, which is what we have here is the Gemara.
63 Mesachot.
63, right? 63 Masechtot. In the Talmud we have 37. Only 37. In the Talmud Bavli. Bavli, 37. In the Yerushalmi, 39. Okay, thank you. Close. But anyways, what else do we have here in terms of the
We have
the collections? Good. We also have Midrash.
And Brightus.
Midrash, 2 types of Midrash.
Haggadah and Halacha.
Right, Midrash Halacha and Midrash Agadah. Legal and non-legal stuff. Of course, there's a mix in both. But the Midrash Halacha is much more legal teachings, whereas Midrash Agadah is much more heavily weighted towards the non-legal material. And we also said that other than the Mishnah, we also have the Tosefta. Tosefta, which is a collection of Brightos. Brightot. If you're going to say it Ashkenazis, it's Brightos. Okay?
I was just saying it in English. I was
So
what we have to understand, though, is this is a major
should we
line. This is the words of the Tanaim, which become the foundation of all the discussions afterwards. The Gemara, the scholars here in Amoraim, in Babel, and in Eretz Israel, they all accepted that the words of the Tanaim cannot be argued against. We discuss them, we interpret them, but this is foundational building blocks of the rest of the way Judaism is described. Yes,
we
Dave?
also put the Zohar into this group?
Good question.
Because it's allegedly there's
Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, generation number 4. We're going to get now. We're going to do the names here also. But yes, you could put it in there. Sure. Of course, it wasn't revealed till the 13th century.
Yeah,
But
so I think,
traditionally, the understanding is, and I think it's true that the teachings had their origin with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Some people say that Rabbi Moshe de Leon in the 13th century, he was what's it called? Channeling the soul of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So really, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai wrote it, but it was channeled through Rabbi Moshe de Leon in the 13th century.
So,
There's different ways. It could happen. I don't
It
know.
should not be put into this group. I think it does not. It's.
We'll leave it for now. Yeah, Hirsch, question.
So one cannot argue against the Tanaim, but let's say two Talmudim that are having a Haguta, and they're using different Tanaim.
Yes.
Arguments of different Tanaim.
Yes.
They're having, like they're saying, oh,
Right.
this Tana said this, this
It
Tana
happens
said
often.
this.
It happens often that this Amora says, I believe I'm following this Tana, and the other Amora disagrees with him and says, I'm following another Tana. And they're allowed to continue. They each have their source in the Mishnaic period. And so that they each can, they have solid ground on which to base themselves. Okay, yeah, question?
How it works? Because like the Talmud Bavli is much bigger than Talmud
Yerushalmi.
right?
It's bigger. Well, we're going to talk about why.
Size, yeah.
Yeah.
But how is possible if you say that they didn't know how to keep Shabbat?
a lot changed from year 200 till year 500. Hundreds of years. Very quickly, Rav taught everybody. They became great scholars in Bavel. Very quickly. Rav had 1,200 students. Shmuel and Nahardia had another hundreds and hundreds of students. They became very, very learned very quickly. The community in Bavel became much stronger. It's just how it started. It started very weak. Lots of people, but they're very weak in terms of the scholarship. But very quickly they caught up.
So can you comment? Can you elaborate? There was many people. Barely any of them were Shomer Shabbat or observant at all, and in just a few generations, the majority of them became well learned and observant. Can you
Amazing! They must have had great teachers.
Well, can we analyze it and then emulate it for here, for now?
I wish I could. We try. We learn a lot. We learn the Talmud, and we learn a lot about the lives of the Amoraim, and they were tremendous leaders. They're still part of Chazal. We consider them to be our sages because of their tremendous power. Educational power. We spoke about Chia and his educational approach. We spoke about Rabbi and Rav Yosef being, the analytic mind versus the breadth of knowledge, the comprehensive knowledge. Sinai versus There's so many qualities that they had, each one with their own qualities, and they were tremendous. This was a tremendous period. This 500 years formed Judaism. It got recorded, summarized in the Talmud, and then from till today, 1,000 years later, 1,500 years later, right? This is year 500, we're 2022. 1,500 years we've been basically following the word and studying the words of Chazal, these sages. Very powerful spiritually, educationally, and intellectually. Amazing. Despite all the persecution they were going through, the Roman Empire, the Byzantine, the Sassanids, no, Crusaders is much later. Crusaders much later.
Oh, that was after the Talmud finished?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's 500 years after the Talmud. We'll get there. That's period 5, 6, and 7. Soon we're going to get to there. But right now we're focusing on, and this is what we're going to summarize now.
So the Talmud probably was
The book of Judaism.
put together in 500.
Approximately. Yes.
Yes. I'm saying, Rob, what is to be done to repeat their efforts of going from nothing to the greatest center of the Jewish world? How do we get done this a few centuries? What do we do?
We're doing our best. We're trying. We're trying. The education is major emphasis, of course, on education. But it's easy to say and hard to do, as we know. They didn't have. I want to give us a little bit of credit. In those days, they didn't have the internet, so they didn't have to fight against mass media. They didn't have the breakdown of traditional society. As they were living within, a different age than we are today. So we can't just say copy paste what they did. We should do. We have our challenges, and they had their challenges. They were very successul, Baruch Hashem, very productive, and
It's a very unnatural.
Unnatural?
Yeah, because normally you see over the generations, people lost this.
That's right.
And it's been more hard to teach Torah, to learn, and the many children leave the religion or do other stuff.
Right. This is so that's why I believe, and that's why the standard approach is that the Chazal. What did we say yesterday? They were like Moshe and Har Sinai. They were channeling the revelation from God. They were prophets. But we learned a few stories where they had power to do miracles, right? They had a bat call came out. This divine voice rang out from heaven and gave them direction here and there. This was a period which was almost equivalent to the revelation at Sinai. The Torah was being put through the prism the white light that they got from maybe the 24 books of the Bible, of the written Torah, were now put through the prism of their souls, of all these Tanaim and Amorim, this 500 generations. And the Torah became wider and richer and deeper than ever before during this period of the development, expansion of the oral law. And this is, of course, the recording of the oral law is in the Talmud, which summarizes both the Mishnah and the Gemara. The Talmud includes this period. Okay, so let's just quickly give me what did you have for your names for the major players? And we can't put all of the Tanaim and Amorim on the wall. We won't have enough room. All the walls of the room won't be enough. We need to have just the major. We have here what? 12 generations. So the first generation we have Tanaim. I would put Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And the story, remember, we had him coming, saving Rabban Gamliel. You want to put Rabban Gamliel as well, but there's just so many Rabban Gamliels, and he was more the figurehead. He was the leader of the scholars in Yavne. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is a good way to start. The second generation.
Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua.
Good. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. Next.
Then we got Rabbi Akiva.
Of course. Rabbi Akiva and
Rabbi Yochanan ben
I would add Rabbi Ishmael, because they were really the pair that fought, that had different schools. And it's true that Rabbi Ishmael's
was the
students
school of
didn't.
Shammai?
Not necessarily, no. Rabbi Eliezer was a student of the house of Shammai. But Rabbi Ishmael, I don't think he was a student of the house of Shammai. But he did have a different tradition of how to lidrosh, the 13
he wrote
methods of expounding the Torah, what we studied yesterday, and we say them every day in the Siddur. This is Rabbi Ishmael, 13 methods. Rabbi Akiva also had his list of methods, but we don't say it in the prayers. Famously, we talked about Rabbi Akiva and him surviving the Roman persecution. 24,000 students that died. He was left with 5. In the 5th generation, we have the 5 students, including, of course, Rabbi Meir and Rashbi, and we don't have to know all their names, but okay. And the 5th generation, of course, is Rabbi, or otherwise known as Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Judah the Prince. Yehuda Hanasi. Okay, so we've got 5 generations of Tanaim. Let's try to put the basic major leaders in the land of Israel. So, of course, in the first generation of Babel, we have Rav and Shmuel, right?
Okay. But in Israel, that's Yoshua ben Levi and Yaman.
And
Yeah, what was that?
Chanina, Rav Chanina Bar Chama, and Rabbi Yanai. Let's just put Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Okay, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. In between here, we have Rav Chia Hagadol. If you remember the story I told you earlier, that started off the class. Those who came a little late missed the story about Chia Hagadol, but it's getting better. It's getting better. Baruch Hashem. Let's keep up the good work. The next generation, of course, in Eretz Yisrael, the leader of the entire Jewish people, Rabbi Yochanan and Ben Nafcha, and of course, Reish Lakish. Good. Reish Lakish.
So,
Reish Lakish the gladiator.
Right?
Oshaya Rabbi. Yeah, Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Oshaya Rabba, he wrote the Tosefta, collected the Tosefta, sort of in between Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi and the first generation.
Bar Kapara and
Also, all of them, they're sort of in
All
between
of
here.
them?
They're sort of in between.
it's not here, not there.
Exactly. Not here, not there.
Alright.
They're not their own generation. They're just sort of the link between the Tanaim and the Amoraim.
So if I quote Oshaya or one of these three,
Rabbi Oshaya, and land of Israel, Rabbi Chia, yeah.
I consider them Tana. Like I can ask how say the word. I can quote them and
As-
disagree with another Tana, or I can quote them and disagree with another Amora.
It's hard to answer. It's hard to answer. Usually they're not considered to be Tanaim with full authority of the Tanaim, but they're not. They have I don't know how to answer that question.
Okay.
The
for sure-
Tosefta has the words of Chia, Rabbi Chia, and Rabbi Oshaya, so maybe they are like Tanaim, but
But for sure, Amoraim, it's possible to get to these opinions and compare.
yes, definitely they quote them.
Yeah.
For sure.
For
Okay,
Amoraim.
second generation after Rav and Shmuel, we have Rav Huna. Again, Rav Huna. Here we start using the title, Rav and Rav Yehuda. Not to be confused with Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, Rav Yehuda. Third generation, of
Rabbi
course.
Yosef
Rabba
with
with a B
with a base and a head.
and Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef, of course.
Rabbi is with a hey, not an aleph, okay? Right?
That's right. Put an H there so that you can. And of course, Abai and Rava in the fourth generation. On every page of Talmud, we have Abai and Rava. And after the generations after Abai and Rava, pretty much what the Amoraim are doing, they're discussing the opinions of Abai and Rava. They're so central. What do we have in the Eretz Yisrael at this time?
Ami Asi Zero.
Right, Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi. Rabbi Zeir was interesting. Rabbi Zeir was representative for us of, there was a group of scholars who went, they're known as Nechutai, who went down. What do you mean they went down? Where did they go down to? They went down to Bavel.
Okay.
There was communication between the schools in Bavel and the schools in Eretz Yisrael. And there's Rav Dimi and Ula. They were known as the travelers. And they brought teachings from here to there. And they said, well, we've been discussing this in this academy. What do you have to say about that in Eretz Yisrael? And there were letters written, and they were back and forth. So there's definitely always communication. What do we have in the fourth generation here? We have Hillel II.
Nessia.
Hillel Nessia, very good. Nessia is a descendant, known as Hillel II. And he made the calendar. Fourth generation, we have Rabbi Mana and Rabbi Tuchma. The fifth generation, sorry. Okay, and that's the end. Here we have Papa, not the Pope. And then we have Rav Ashi and Ravina, who started the editing of the Talmud. The other generations are less important, seventh and eighth. Ultimately, there's a second Ravina the second, but just to make it complete, who's in the sixth generation? What do we have here? Mar bar Rav Ashi. So Rav Ashi's son, his name was
Is this seven?
Mar.
Okay.
Yes, Mar, the son of Rav Ashi,
Mar ben Rav
and
Ashi.
That's the seventh, no?
the seventh, and then the eighth is Ravina the second. Okay, great. Let's get it
Are we
out.
done with these?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's get these on the on our charts. So the most important ones that I need in really big letters in black are Chazal, Tanaim, and Amoraim. Who's going to do those for me?
I can do
Hirsch, here you go.
All three of them.
Chazal, Tanaim, and Amoraim.
Oh.
Big letters, also Hebrew.
And the next big task is Midrash, Mishnah, Tosefta. Who's going to do that for me? Ariel's got Midrash, Mishnah, and Tosefta as the products, the major products of the Tanaitic period. Sorry. And then, who's going to do the Gemara
I volunteer stripping.
and the Talmud? There you go.
Just Gemara and Talmud? Like the
Yeah.
whole category of Gemara.
Yeah, Talmud. And then we're going to have to divide up
The
some
names of the Tanaim, or like
the names of the Tanaim, the names of the Tanaim and the Amoraim.
Gemara
So,
and Talmud or Bavli and Yerushalmi?
But
Probably
would
Yerushalmi.
you like to have all the names of all Tanaim? Or
so I'd like to have there's what are there? 12, maybe 20. Is that too much? What do you think?
I mean, if
What
you-
we should have is maybe like I would do like something like this. I'd do like
like
Tanaim, generation number 1, and then you could add in small,
50 names.
Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Okay, and then you'd have one which is like Tanaim 2. Okay, and then we'd have the names underneath. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so
I do the
David, you do the first, I'd say, 3 generations of Tanaim. Okay? These. You can have this as well. Oh, sorry. Who was going to do the generation 4 and 5 of Tanaim?
I can do that.
Amos. Generations 4 and 5. See these markers here. Okay, Israel, you'll do the first generation of Amoraim in Eretz Israel and in Bavel. Okay? Guess you divide it in half. All right? And Pinchas, you'll do the second generation. Here's some markers. You do the second generation. Renan, you do third and the fourth. Third and the fourth. I'll give you a marker.
Tough, Lamed, Mem, Vav, Dalet, Talmud?
Mem Vav Dalet, correct? Yeah. Yeah. Put the names in the. You're doing the second generation, right?
The proper Nikud for Amoraim would be and then Kamas. With the Halam on top of the Vav and right. So the first Aleph has a and the Resh has a Kamas.
Correct. I believe so.
You believe so? Or you know?
Yes, I believe so. I'm not sure. I believe so. So everybody's busy. Okay. So I guess I'll do. You're doing 3 and 4, Renan, right? I'll do 5 till the end. I'd like them to have English as well. You can do Hebrew as well.
Oh, okay.
But not only Hebrew, because not everybody can read the Hebrew.
Sorry.
Generation 5. So in Israel, we have
Rabbi,
Correct.
right?
That's correct. So Israel, Pinchas, and Renan, this is what I'm expecting. For the Amoraim, so there's an A for the Amoraim, generation 5. In Eretz Israel, Rabbi Mana, and in Bavel, Rav Papa. I'll put it Rav. No, you don't have to do anything. Just this is for the. Do you understand what I'm saying? So this is an example of you're doing 1, you're doing 2, you're doing 3 and 4. I'm doing 5. Now we'll do 6 and 7 as well. It's just an example of what I'd like it to look like. I have the number of the generation. Come on, Moshe, you could add in the number of Masechtot. There's lots of things you could do there. Tosefta. Right. It's made up of brightot.
Written in Babylon, created in Babylon. What verb would you use?
Written. Sure.
Established.
It's a nice class project, huh? Brings you back to grade school. Definitely.
Rabbi Shimon ben Gamaliel is also the part of the Torah. This Tanaim.
Also, it's true. It's true. Yeah. He was the Nasi at the time.
So,
Oh, here we go.
Yosef. All the 4 generations, Yosef, not Yosef.
What are you talking about?
4 generations.
Rav Yosef.
It's a Rabbi Yosef.
Rav Yosef.
No, it's a-
Rabba and Rav Yosef.
Okay, here, this term is Yosef. It's missing.
Okay.
Is this the name? What relation is Yosef and Yosef? Are they nicknames?
It's a good question. Seems to be a distinct name, to tell you the truth. Ariel, you want to come up and
Get more?
help me?
Yeah.
We'll put them on the board.
Oh, I finished, yeah, I guess.
Great. So,
The Josh would be first, like.
that's right. But it's where I would put them is here. Let's see. Put Midrash first. Do one like here, one like there. What I like to do is leave room for the actual Tanai. So I'll put them over here.
Oh, okay.
This is what we leave, and then Midrash and then Mishnah, and then Pesach. Okay? Thanks.
Should I leave a space like, I don't know, like this?
A little less. That's about right.
Can you borrow this?
You can write a little bit more about the Mishnah. That it's, 6 orders, 63 Masechtot, as you wish. Yeah. Oh, perfect. Great. Thank you.
We'll finish
Rabbi, as like their title you wrote?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Hmm.
Can move Rabbi. Second line.
Here it doesn't say Rav Yosef anywhere.
Yeah, I
You should
can
put the
move.
title. Yeah, you should type it. Yeah. I would even do it over again. Instead, just write Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Yassi, Rabbi Zera. So take another page. Where are the pages? Here.
Ah, oh.
And yeah, I would do it with the Rabbi before the name.
Babylon come Israel.
Yeah, because if you think
Israel and Babylon. Yeah.
if you think in Hebrew, it's like from here to there.
I know, but where this is in English, so you're doing it in English, so you can't mixing me up here. Pinchas, are you okay? You have a question? Or you're
Rabbi Oshaya
Yes, Rabbi Oshaya, yeah.
and the Bet Shalim Sefer is the Mazal.
That's where he lived.
Where they live.
That's where he lived, yeah. Yeah. And where he's buried. You can go see his grave. We really should. Do a class trip.
Where is it in?
In the north, in the Galil.
Oh, we should incorporate the Galil too, please.
Absolutely. Yeah, now that we've learned about Rebbe, and what a great,
Of course we are. That's
great
right.
read.
He's going to bring us to the graves of all the great Chachamim.
That's right. That's right. To go to the graves of Rebbe, go to the grave of Shimon Bar Yochai. Not on Lag BaOmer. Too many people. Too dangerous.
Okay, it's okay.
You're done? Perfect. Great.
I hope there's not too many mistakes. Or any.
Fine. It's fine. It's great. Right. Perfect.
I see on this chart, like, this means that they are following the schools.
That's correct.
Those schools.
Those
Okay.
schools, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But if we say the beginning is like 0, I see that.
It's not really
Hillel and-
considered the first generation of
Oh, yeah.
Tanaim yet.
Now I get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Need anything else done?
We're good.
Rabbi.
I mean, unless you want to add on to what you know about the Mishnah, something you want to you can write on the wall, but you don't want to. Okay, fine, that's fine.
It's Rabba.
Rabbah doesn't get any title,
No?
just Rabbah.
Just Rabba.
It's an acronym, right?
And Rabbi Yosef?
Rav Yosef, yes, Rav Yosef. How's the title? I'm gonna do start from the bottom.
Somebody already did Rabbi? Traditional Period?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's part of many. You might want to add it here. Shimon Bar Yochai.
Okay.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Wow.
Great.
Okay.
Terrific. Who's doing the Hirsch, are you done?
No.
Almost? Okay. Just trying to
to
space out.
Oh, did we have the story?
Crowns, I like it. Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Akiva.
Any story from Rabbi Ishmael? Do you have one?
I'm thinking of adding like a demarcation for this.
We have the 13 ways to expound
There was Rabbi Ishmael.
on the Torah. Rabbi Ishmael.
Okay.
Rabbi Ishmael, the 13 midot she'atorah nidreshet behem. 13 ways to derive things from the Torah. Klal ufrat, kal v'chomer. Remember that? We did that yesterday. We say it every day in the prayers if you have enough time.
Midot, right?
Midot are like in this context it means methods of exegesis, of inferring things from the text. Okay, come on guys, let's finish it up. I want to show it all together.
13 ways to
Derive from the text. Yeah. Lidrosh. Okay, David, are we ready to start? 1, 2, 3. Tanaim.
Well, for the generation, everybody was a Rabbi.
Fourth generation, Abai and Rava, yeah.
Before.
Fourth generation is Abai and Rava. See your handiwork on the board, David?
oh yeah.
You like?
I do. Excellent.
Try to put some storages.
Excellent. Thank you. I'll put them on the board now. Oh, look at that. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua with the batko in the heavens. I like it.
With the dispute over the oven, yeah. I put very much effort in this.
No, Bashamayim, it is not in heaven.
Okay.
Beautiful. Rabbi Kiva in the Pardes. And Rabbi Yishmael is 13 ways. Well done. Well done. So the Tanaim, I'm going to put this over here. Here's the Tanaim. And then, who has 4 and 5? Tanaim, where's Hirsch? You said, who has
4 and 5 is me.
I give 2.
who is 1 and 2? Could I? You're Bamoraim. No, 1 second. This is Tanaim.
Can.
Yeah, where's Where's Tanaim 4 and 5?
I did too.
You did?
I did the 4 and 5, Tanaim.
Tanaim? Oh, perfect. Great, thank you. That's right. You did. And 5. Perfect. Now, Amoraim number 1. Israel, you ready? Perfect. Yeshua ben Levi and Rav and Shmuel. Perfect, great, good job.
Okay, here's.
Thank
something
you.
I wrote out all 39.
What, you wrote them all on the board?
Yeah.
On the little piece of paper?
Yeah,
That's
what I
great.
wrote separate.
Very cool. Now,
I don't know if we'll have time to do the same for Bob, maybe another day.
number 1. Where's my title? Amoraim.
Maybe I'll do this another day.
Did you write down the 37 or you wrote?
I wrote the 39 for Yerushalmi, and I need to do the 37 for Bavli, but I might do that another day because my hand hurts from writing all this.
Okay.
I can come back and do it
2.
another day.
Are we gonna make it? Maybe. Where do we have 3? Here's 3. Amoraim 3 and 4. Make me some balls, please.
How big do you want to make? Peas, smaller than peas?
Smaller than peas.
That's a lot bigger than a pea.
It's too big. Perfect. Number 3. Israel. Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Asi, Rabbi Zera, Rabba, and Rav Yosef. Very good. And I just see that I need to connect these. Moved over a little bit too much. And finally, Moshe's conclusion, the Talmud, Yerushalmi, and that's all. I don't need any more. And I think we're done, right? Everybody has a Talmud. Yerushalmi is going to be over here. 39 Masechta, written in Israel. Wow! And you wrote them all out.
Yes.
Not the Talmud Bavli.
No, I can probably do it later.
Amazing. And finally, Talmud Bavli.
My mom is going to leave.
Well done, Mazal Tov. We have the period of the sages, the green era on our wall. Mazal Tov. If anybody's watching, you can see what we're doing. Everybody smile and enjoy our artwork.
Yep.
Have a good